My name is Marie Gervais, and I'm the host of the Culture and Leadership Connections podcast, where culture, communication, and context meet in the workplace. Discover what cultural influences have formed the careers of noteworthy leaders from around the world in a variety of professions by exploring the groups that shaped who they are today. Hello, Culture and Leadership Connections podcast listeners. Today, I'm very excited to present to you Monica Pierre. Monica is an Emmy Award-winning news reporter and public speaking and storytelling coach and mentor, also the executive producer and host of the Powerhouse Woman Show. Monica is a professor of practice with the Department of Mass Communications at Xavier University, where she teaches podcasting, broadcast announcing, and storytelling to the next generation of aspiring media talent. She is on a mission to guide, inspire, and tell the stories of first-generation purpose-driven women leaders and entrepreneurs. Through the Tell Your Story Incubator program, she helps them identify their stories, unleash their voices, and shape powerful new narratives about their impact, power, and legacies. Monica believes that what we create today can live on generations after we're gone if we are intentional about boldly sharing our stories. That's a great bio, Monica. Thank you and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me. And you read it so beautifully. I'm going, who is that person she's talking about? She sounds great.
She does, but she is great. That's why she sounds great.
Oh, thank you.
So
a pleasure to be on the show. Thank you so much for the invitation and for being so open to having me on.
Oh, well, I'm very excited to delve into your story a little bit more. So why don't we start with you saying a little bit about who you are, not the official bio, but a little bit about, where are you from? What about your family? What's a little bit of personal stuff about you?
My backstory, in a way. Mm-hmm. Yes, I am the daughter of sharecroppers in Louisiana, and we grew up digging sweet potatoes until I was in the 11th grade. So we strongly believed in family and hard work and faith and moving forward. So I grew up the oldest of five. We have 4 girls and my brother. So I basically grew up in the country digging potatoes, but I always had my eyes beyond the fence. I always wanted something that was beyond what I saw. Not that I was disrespectful of what we had, but I just knew for me there was more. So I grew up wanting to be an actress. And of course, we were the first in our family to go to college. So I figured, you're not going to waste a degree on being an actor, are you? So I did more traditional routes of being in education. Didn't like it that much. So I changed my major, even though we adored the teachers and those who were educators and educated in our lives. But it just wasn't for me. But I didn't know what to major in. So I got the course catalog, which I didn't even know existed. And I landed on psychology. And I thought that was going to be awesome. Didn't know what it was, but I thought it was going to be great. And I'm in there maybe a semester or two saying, oh, no, this is not it. So I'm in between majors and I landed on broadcasting and figured that was the next best thing to acting. And I didn't realize how much I enjoyed telling the stories of others. I really connected. And I just saw it was my role to really be intentional, Marie, about what I selected as their sound bites or what part that I included. So I said, well, okay, I will do this. So I have been working in media, telling the stories of others for a very long time. I've won a couple of Emmys, one for a news report that I did a series, and then another one just a couple of years ago. It was a non-scripted television pilot where I pretty much played myself.
Was it hard to play yourself or easy to play yourself?
It was a little bit of both because, again, the story that had been told about me that I accepted was that I was a very serious journalist. And I just definitely didn't want to portray that in the show. I wanted to have the fun side of me. So I was a little bit open to saying, okay, here is what I'm going to do. I am going to be me and not the reporter. So it was so much fun. And the fact that we won an Emmy for the pilot was amazing. So I enjoyed it a lot.
Wow. What is it called?
All right, I'll be very clear. It's called Your Mama and Them, which basically means your mother and them. But
Mm-hmm.
it's YA, mama, and then N apostrophe EM, your mama
Mm-hmm.
and them. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
real New Orleans question. Like, how's your mom and them? How are they
Yeah.
doing? Tell
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
more about it. So that was the name of the show. And we did all sorts of fun things. We went out and about. I went to goat yoga, where I actually did an interview with the person, and with the goats on our backs. The three of us, we went to drag school in the French Quarter of New Orleans. It was a lot of fun. And we just, you
This sounds
know,
like the best job ever. You could just
it was.
go find
It
out all
didn't get
sorts of
picked
things.
up, but I enjoyed it. We had the best time. It's like, oh, we have to get this on the air. We have to do more. I said, I want to do all sorts of fun things. It was a great show, just
It
for the
does.
pilot, at least.
It sounds fabulous. I'm sure I would have loved every moment.
No, but I'm going to send you a link to the pilot.
I'd love to watch it. That's great. Thank you. So, you just told me a little bit about yourself, which was very intriguing, and it just makes me want to know more about your childhood. I mean, you're pretty clear about who you are and what you're doing and the way you lead and how you come across in life. And so, what made you that way? Are there some incidents in your childhood that stand out?
Oh, again, one of the things I loved about my childhood. Now, remember, we're growing up, sharecroppers, did not have a lot. The world would say we were very, very poor, and we had to work in the fields, go to school, clean the house, all of those things. But what I loved was looking around, not at my mom and dad, but also women in our neighborhood or our town. Some of them were so focused on creating things for themselves. One in particular, my Aunt Jane, and she was the first businesswoman I ever knew. Because in my town, we were, digging sweet potatoes. We were sharecroppers. But she had the audacity to call herself a businesswoman.
Hmm.
And what she would do, Marie, if she needed money, if she needed to move her family along, she would sell pies. She would bake pies and sell pies. She would sew. She would do dressmaking. She would do whatever. We would call her like a multi-purpose person as far as the business is concerned. She wanted to say, okay, we're going to do this and I'm going to make it happen. She went to school and became licensed as a hairdresser. She did all of those things. But what a lot of people in the town would do, they would criticize her. Like, oh, she's just wasting her husband's money. Oh, she's just wasting her husband's sugar. That's what they would say, like when she'd make the pies and everything. She's just wasting that. But she kept going. And if it bothered her, we did not know because she was determined that she was going to use her multi talents to create something new in her life. And before then, it was people I had read in books or
She was
television.
your real live and related to you example. Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. And so when
Yeah.
she passed away a couple of years ago, I'd forgotten just all of the wonderful things she had created. And in her obituary, they noted that she had been an entrepreneur for 50 years.
Hmm. Hmm.
That was amazing to me. And she was my aunt. She ran for political office,
Wow.
did not win, but she had the guts after her son was drowned. And she didn't like the way the sheriff's department had handled the investigation, trying to find her son. He did drown, but she said, you know what? I don't like this. I don't like how we were handled. And she ran against him.
Good for
Did
her.
not win.
Good for her.
Yes,
Because
she did that.
the thing is, she's establishing a justice criteria just by her actions. Although she didn't probably see justice, she's going, this is it. This is the right way. This is how I can not allow this continued behavior to be considered acceptable.
Right.
It may continue,
Right.
but it's not going to be accepted.
Right. Just because you're Black or African American, my son's life was no less than anybody else's life. He was 16. He had his whole life ahead of him. And it was a very simple fishing trip that my uncle, his dad, and a couple of other men and a couple other boys went on. They just went on a fishing trip, in the wooded area. They crossed the stream. He lost his footing and he drowned or he was missing. And it was kind of a lackadaisical approach to find him.
Yeah.
That search and rescue wasn't done the way it should have been done.
Mm-hmm.
And
They
my
didn't
aunt said,
take him
I'm going to
seriously.
run. No,
Yeah.
didn't take him
Yeah.
serious at all. So she ran against the sheriff. And I don't know how it is sometimes in Canada, but in some of these very small towns, the sheriffs are very, very powerful.
Yeah, for
But
her
she
to run
took him
against the
on.
sheriff was really audacious.
She had an impact on me. And sometimes when you're watching these things growing up, and even as a young adult or even earlier on, you're not really clear as to that impact. And I'll tell you one quick story before, and then we can move on to whatever you want to talk about. But my Aunt Jane, I mentioned that she went to school, became a licensed hairdresser. She was doing it in her home, and then she built a little shop where she could bring in clients and do their hair. And when I moved from my very, very small town to New Orleans, Louisiana, in the US, about 2 hours away. And I was starting my career. And she said, I want you to come. I'll do your hair. And I had my money and I was going to give her money. She goes, no, no money. I want you to promise me that you will be brave and that you'll pray and that you'll do the very best you can.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just an amazing woman.
Mm. On so many levels, she influenced you. And I think you've spoken about quite a few of them already. How has her example been meaningful to you in your own development, would you say?
She, and even my mom too, and there were so many other women that weren't related to me. They showed me what reinvention or telling a different story or a new story about your life can look like. When she wanted something, she created it. When she didn't like something, she attacked it or changed it or tried to make a difference. So that's what I saw from her.
She was creative and she had agency. She didn't see herself as being a victim. She was, I am going to do something about this.
Right. And I didn't find out until later on, just recently when she passed away, that when she was a young girl, she liked school, but her parents took her out of school and sent her to work for a rich family in the northeastern part of the United States. She did not want to go. She wanted to stay in the Louisiana town with the family and do the things that she wanted to do, have the dreams that she wanted. But her family said, no, here's a job opportunity for you. We want you to go and work for this family in another state. And she said, we found out she just really, it just aggravated her to no end. And that was a common story that happened for people of color, particularly in the South. And they said, go and live with your sister and take care of her first baby, all these other things. Like you just didn't have any control over your dreams or what you really wanted to do. So I think that had a lot to do about her saying, if I want something, I'm going after it and I'm going to do it.
Mm-hmm. So she went, they did have this experience where I had no control over it, but that's not how I'm going to live the rest of my life.
Right. I'm not going to be that victim. I'm not going to say yes to the story that you want me to have. I'm going to create and say yes to the stories that I want for my life and for my family.
Yeah, that's a wonderful example. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you for asking.
What about in your teen years or as a young adult? What experience stands out for you as something that marked your journey in leadership and culture and the way you contribute to the world?
Some of it was not being seen and wanting to be seen, wanting to do things that others weren't doing. Like I said, I wanted to act. I really wanted to act. And there was not the opportunities for me. We didn't have opportunities to go to plays or we didn't have opportunities to be in shows. But what I saw that really shaped me was my father. And again, it's seeing what's not there and creating it. As sharecroppers, we were living in a house that did not belong to us. We were living on land that we did not own. And my father wanted to own his own home. And I saw him as a teenager say, I'm going to do this. And we remember when he came home one day and said to my mom, everybody called her Sis, S-I-S, short for sister. That was her nickname. He goes, sis, this is the last house we're going to live in that we don't own. And you're going like, yay, this is going to be great. We're going to get a house. We're going to get a new house. And it's going to be a house that's going to have indoor plumbing. It's going to be a house that's going to have air conditioning. Those are my dreams. Like, this is going to be the house. Well, we didn't know how long it was going to take. So my father sat on that journey to own his own home. And Marie, I'll give you the shortened version. It took 30 years
I believe it.
to save the money, buy the land, pay out the land, get the blueprint, pay out the blueprint. I mean, get the materials, pay that out. And he basically built that house by himself in the 27th year of the dream that he had no idea when it would come to pass.
Well, but he was
And
determined and he kept at it until he saw the result.
yes, and he built it almost by himself. And 30 years later, we were grown, and I'm going like, oh, I guess, this will never for my parents. They were really good people. I don't think this house dream is going to happen, but it did. So what that said in me was determination that and persistence, even when we don't know how long, and we rarely know how long it's going to take, or what it's going to be, or what obstacles will come, that man, my dad, showed us what it looks like. And when he passed away, it's not like everybody in my family died. I'm going, another death story. But when he passed away, the entire town showed up and they basically adored my father because in addition to being persistent and determined, he had such kindness in his heart that even though he did not have a lot, he was willing to share. If he found out you needed something, he would do his best to see if he could help. If he had crops, extra fruit, he would bring it to you. And he was that kind of person. So I saw these things and these seeds began, planted inside of me. And oftentimes we don't know exactly what that means. We're just witnessing it. And the older we get to see, the fruit of that. We get to see what it means, not just for us directly, but for others, that extended family, those people in town, their kids. It's just amazing life that he had with so little that he really reaped a great harvest with his children and also with his life.
Well, it goes to show how you can leave a legacy, and it's not material means that causes you to leave a legacy. It's the way you treat others and the strength of character that you evince in your actions.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's why I'm really interested in legacy and people being able to tell the story of the legacy.
Yeah, because if you've got a legacy, but there's nobody can tell the story, then it doesn't become visible and it doesn't have the same transformative effect. It does in people's lives in the moment, but that story living on and the way you're telling the story now, you've probably heard of the post-traumatic slave syndrome. Well, there's the post-traumatic transformation syndrome as well. And as you start to engage in things where you feel you've got agency and take control over some small piece, and you inspire hope in yourself and others, then what happens is you transform from the injured DNA to a recreative DNA. So you actually affect your body at a DNA level. And that healing affects others because it promotes healing in them as well. So that story of your dad and his 30-year house journey, or longer than 30 years, and you telling that story continues to heal other people, even at the DNA level, from them just hearing that story.
Oh, thank you for that. Yes. That makes me smile. It makes my soul smile that he was able to do that. And sometimes we do things kind of intentionally, but other times we just do it because that's inside of us. And my father could have been very, very bitter. He was born in 1927 in the South.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think what I was always amazed at was he was still a kind and generous man.
Mm-hmm. He could have chosen to be bitter. He could have chosen to let it take him over and be really angry about it, but he chose to be kind. It's even more powerful.
Absolutely. And yes, there's power in that. In all of the ways he found in which to be kind and sweet and nice and pass that along to us. And we're passing it along to our nieces and nephews. And my goal is let's keep that story going. Let's not forget after my nieces pass on. We need to tell it. We need to share it. And for those listening as well, our stories vary. Yes, when you build a multi-billion-dollar company, or that's great too. But if you're a kind person who shares and says that I am going to invest in others in all sorts of ways, by being kind, by being gentle, by being forgiving, by being nice, that's legacy too. And oftentimes we don't recognize that or celebrate that or be intentional about that. And where I'm from in the South, we call it pouring into other people.
Love it.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
pour into other human beings. And it doesn't matter if you're a philanthropist with 7 figures or you're just someone living off of Social Security check. You know, we always found ways. My mother would do things when somebody would graduate. She would put $5 in an envelope, or she'd put $10 in an envelope, or my aunt would do my hair and give me these words of wisdom. We pour into other people and it looks so different, but it should be recognized and celebrated as something that's important.
Because it's the way we should all live, and we'd have a wonderful world if we all did that. And now, those were wonderful examples from your childhood and your early young adult years. You were born into the South, you're born into Louisiana, you're born into a faith tradition, you're born into a time when there was strong racialization and still is, and, injustice around you. All of those things you didn't choose, you were born into them. And so what would you say stands out for you now as having influenced who you are from those group influences that you were born into?
Someone asked me a long time ago if I could be a different race, would I choose something else? And I said, no, because I believe the Creator doesn't make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
This is who I am. And, a lot of it makes me so aggravated and a bit put off and angry that, this was the story that I was born into. But even with all of that, I do believe that there's the story that we choose.
Right. We're getting to those. That's the next question. Because right now I'm thinking, what were you born into that you took with you as part of your legacy? You already spoke about some of it. So sometimes what people remember from what they were born into is something they're in opposition to. And sometimes it's something that they cherish that helped to form them and strengthen them for the next piece. And it depends what it is personally, what stands out for you from all of those situations, So what stands out for you from those groups?
Generosity, that's the first word that came to mind. I saw what generosity looks like, even when you don't have a lot yourself.
In fact, probably the people with less means are more generous than the people with more.
Absolutely. My mother we had fruit trees. So every summer, she would can figs and peaches and all these wonderful things. And she would do it so beautifully. And if somebody would stop by and visit, she would give them a jar of whatever, or she'd give them some meat out of the freezer. What I took from that as I grew up, I'm not canning or killing hogs or anything like that, but I love that legacy and that spirit of generosity and generosity of time, generosity of living, of listening to someone else's story, that generosity of helping somebody with an issue, the generosity of me if someone's moving into a house to help them hang their curtains or just do those little bitty things that mean a lot. And I remember one day I wrote a note to one of my colleagues at the radio station, and I had noticed he had been struggling with something. So it was a long, long time ago, and I got on the typewriter, believe it or not, typewriter, and I typed him an encouraging message. It was just like, oh, you're doing great. I don't even remember exactly what it was. And one day I'm in the hallway at the radio station and I look into his office. He was the program director for the radio station. And I noticed the note that I wrote on his wall opened up so anyone who walked into his office would see what I had written to encourage him.
Oh,
and of course, all I could see was the strikeout and the typo.
Too bad. But now you can see it as the big generous.
Yes. And so I said, what is this? He goes, oh, this is gold to me. This is gold to me. So, and again, it's that passing on of being generous and that it looks different ways, but the impact is always the same. It means so much in a moment when you're often at a low point.
What you just described to me reminded me of a story when my oldest son was 4 years old. And unlike Louisiana, we have lots of snowstorms. And in the spring, the kids push the pieces of ice and snow into the sewer grates and watch them get dissolved. And it's great fun for them. And he had a wooden sword that somebody had given him. And he was using that to push the snow and ice into the sewer grate. And he poked too far and his sword fell into the sewer. So he came running into the house and he said, my sword fell down the sewer, but it's alive. It's still breathing. I can hear it. And so he said, what do I do? And I said, well, probably we won't be able to rescue it, but I will call the town of Spruce Grove and I'll ask them if there's anybody who cleans the sewers who could come next time they're cleaning the sewers and look for your sword. So I did. And they put the operations department for the town of Spruce Grove manager in charge of this. I just didn't think they'd take it seriously. I said, I mean, he's 4 and it's a wooden sword. I know you probably have better things to do, but next time somebody's down here, if you wouldn't mind looking, he says it's still breathing, right? So I don't know how much longer it's going to be breathing. The guy laughed. He laughed. And 10 minutes later, he came himself, took the sewer grate off, went down, rescued the sword, brought it up, covered in sewage. My son was overjoyed. And I was so touched by that. I mean, of course, he had many other things to do. He was in charge of the operations of the whole town, right? But he just immediately dropped everything and went to rescue this wooden sword. And so I wrote a letter of thanks saying, and I explained the whole part about the sword not, still breathing and stuff like that. And it was the same typewriter letter like you're talking about. So I typed the letter and I mailed it to him. And he took a picture and mailed back a picture of how he had framed it and put it up on his office wall.
Oh.
And he said, I'm just getting all teary-eyed thinking about it. He said, I've been doing this job for 15 years and nobody's ever thanked me once.
Yes, that is the gift of taking the time and being generous and seeing someone really. Yeah. Again, we never know. We just never know.
Yeah. So that was lovely, this piece of generosity that you brought up, that you took with you. And the next question, of course, is about the groups that you chose to belong to, because those groups influence us and we want them to. I mean, if you choose to belong to a profession, you want that influence of that profession and you want to influence the profession as well. And then there are other things. Maybe you traveled somewhere, or maybe you learned another language, or other things that changed in your life. What groups did you join or become a part of in some way, whether you felt really strongly affiliated or not, that you feel have affected you?
One of the groups is the radio industry in New Orleans. I always jokingly say that even though we work and may go on to a different radio station, we're still a radio family and we care about each other. We care when you don't have the job that you had. You're not making the money that you didn't make. And we try to reach out and be in touch with each other. So I'm intentional about my radio family. In fact, before COVID, we had a radio reunion where people we had worked with in radio, and in particular, urban radio, or some we call it Black formatted radio stations. And we just caught up and we talked about those who had passed on. We talked about those who were doing something different. We connected with those who were still on the air doing it and doing what they love. So that's one family for me that I still adore and make it my business to reach out. Karen, I haven't talked to you in a while. What you up to, girl? Very, very, very simple. And there's no competition. It's not, well, Monica's still on the air. That meant that I didn't get the job, or, I aged out, or even though they didn't call it that. I'm no longer working because they decided to do a different format, and what I was doing, what my music show is gone. It's none of that. We genuinely care for each other and support each other and are determined. I mean, we can't wait to do another reunion just to see where people are, not just those who passed on or maybe gone on to other markets, but those who are still around and love each other. In fact, one of the people, LeBron, the guy I mentioned who kept the note that I wrote, we love how he's gone from radio to television and he's still on the air. That's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And we want him to know that.
It's the honor of one is the honor of all.
Yes, absolutely. So that is one group that I'm intentional. And another group that I'm really leaning more into is the group of women, particularly first generation women, who are creating something, who are creating what they want, creating impact, creating influence. They no longer are accepting of the word no or not now or being invisible. I love them. I love that story. I love finding out when was the moment you said enough is enough is enough.
Comes right back from your Aunt Jane.
Yes. And I didn't even know that I was attracted to that group. I didn't know that was the group that would be like, yeah, because I've worked in radio. Okay, we like, we like men, we like, and it's not a disparaging thing, but my soul ignites and connects with them because I know the challenges. I know it's not always easy. I know we've been living a certain story for a while, and to say, this is a new story that I'm writing and creating for myself. And I'm going to be bold and audacious, and I'm going to figure it out. And a lot of people won't understand it because they may associate me with another way or another path or another job or another career, and that they're doing it. I also connect with what I found out about you, Marie. I wanted to meet you. I love meeting people who are beyond the borders of the United States of America. I want to know how you grew up. Thank you for sharing the story when your son was 4 and the sword was still breathing. I want to know about the Monica who lives in Durban. I want to know about the Monica who lives in other parts of Europe, because I just know we're connected some kind of way, that our stories are similar some kind of way. And I don't know everything about all the experience, but I just imagined there was a little girl in Edmonton and she was looking at the sky and she was imagining a life. She was imagining something beyond where she was, not in disrespect, but in possibility. And I want to know her. I want to get to know her real name.
So this is really a story of connection that you're building. And I'm just really in awe of how beautifully you tell that. It's lovely and very inspiring. Let me ask you another question. When you were born, I'm sure people started to say things like, oh, that's just the way Monica does that. Or, yeah, that's Monica. It's written all over her face. There must have been some temperament things that you feel were part of who you are. And then personality you would have added on to as you overcame obstacles and took on opportunities and faced the difficulties we all face in life, each in various ways. So what would you say was your temperament that you were born with? And what's something you've added on?
Oh, that's such a juicy, interesting, lovely, lovely question. My temperament was one, and I don't know how to explain it. I was kind of the one in the room who may, believe it or not say anything.
I
But
believe
I was
you.
always, you believe me?
I do.
I was always watching and paying attention, always. And some people thought I was never shy, but I was like, And so I would notice. I would hear what they were saying. They would mention, I like red. And I would go, make note of that. And the next time I saw something red that they would like, I would bring it to them because I was always being attentive to what was said and what wasn't said.
You were observant and attentive.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
But in knowing that there would be a moment when I could use that information or what I observed or what I paid attention to bring something to that person.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it was something physical or whether it was like, I'm going to pray for that person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to pray for that person. And one of the things I wanted to be early on, in addition to being an actor, I wanted to be a nun, a Catholic nun. And I really wanted to be a Catholic nun. That was my first career choice because I wanted to remember people and think about them. And so I realized, I could do that in any profession. And to this day, I have journal upon journal upon journal where I just write a person's name in my journal. Saw so-and-so today. She was happy. Saw so-and-so today. He looked stressed. I just write it down because I was paying attention or I was listening.
You're paying attention, and it's also a silent prayer for that person.
Yes. And it's in my book, I don't always have the last name. And sometimes I don't even know the name. I just saw them. I just saw them as I was riding around or interacting or covering a news story. So that was one of the temperaments that I brought. And then another one of late is kind of going back to being quiet, that I can still be quiet in a noisy world. I still find moments to be quiet.
It's like you started quiet and then went into having a public voice and gathering stories and then came back to quiet again.
Yes. And I'm learning too that there's so many facets to us that the quiet moments are important. I mean, you put me on a stage with 30,000 people. I'm like, heaven, this is great. I love it. Hello, how's Edmonton? How good? But I could also be quiet. I can also pay attention. I can also, quickly size up something and then go on to the next thing. I'm embracing all the parts of me that over the years have really come to make sense.
I would love to see you in Edmonton on a stage of 30,000 people because, not being a rock star, a country music star, or a hockey player and getting 30,000 people in Edmonton would be pretty fantastic.
Right. And I could see it. I could see it, Marie, because it would be me and it would be others as well. Because again, that generosity of spirit. I want to know who from Edmonton I can bring and put on the stage, who we could talk to, who we could hear sing. I would want it to be just not me, but us as well.
My sister did a program like that when she was away in the north, and she brought in women locally and women externally for a women in leadership speaker program that she carried on for many years. And I always thought that was just a beautiful gesture to bring the local women to the local population's attention and the international women to the local population's attention in a way that they could actually reach out and touch somebody who's would have seemed so far away otherwise. Like, it was just a really nice way of bridging them together. So when you're talking about that, you imagining it and the way you would bring people into a conversation and connect in that particular context, it just reminded me. It's funny that the things that you're saying are reminding me of these things now, but
oh my goodness. I'm going to write that down tonight in my journal because I have to get over there.
You do. We have to make this happen. So we're getting close to the end of the interview, and I would like to ask you two more questions. One of them is, people work with you, and they do all the time. What brings out the best in Monica? What do you need to be at your best self in a work situation?
The freedom to try it and to set it in motion. And even if it's not perfect, which it really is, even if it looks a little wobbly, that we try it. I love trying it and see what works, see how we could do it. My friends always say, like, you just always try to do it different, because I know it can in a beautiful way, not a condemnation that, oh, you messed up. But what if we stood over here? Or what if we did this?
What if?
Why not?
What's the possibility?
It's gonna be incredible. I love that. And oftentimes we just feel that we have to get it right out the gate. And I'm saying, let's just kind of do like a clinical trial of our lives. I'm going to try this and try that. Like a little bit of this, don't like that, I'm going to do that. And have the freedom to do that, and knowing that it's information and not mistakes.
Yeah, expanding the realm of the possible.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then you asked me
I really like that. Yeah. Sorry, what were you going to say?
Was there a two-parter to that question? I'm sorry. I kind of...
No, there wasn't. I have another question I haven't asked you yet, unless you're a mind reader and you can already tell what it is.
No.
You might be able to, because this is your soapbox moment. So what would you like to proclaim to the world and promote? Here's your chance.
I would like to have conversations with people about helping uncover, discover, develop, deliver your story for your business, for your podcast, for your company, where you are. I love that. I love getting to it. And I love helping you figure out what that story is that you could use when you do your networking, or what you could use when people ask you, well, tell me a little bit about yourself, and do it in a dignified way. That your story, because we hear, oh, everybody has a story to tell. Your story is important. Your story matters. Absolutely. But your story is there for you and the world. And what are those little bitty moments that you thought, oh, I hadn't thought about that in forever? And that's the story. I'm working with someone right now, Marie, and she's talking about her grandmother, and the way she talks about her grandmother, and the way she uses her grandmother stories, impact, influence, how she raised her when her mother died when she was 6, how when she got married and had her own son, that basically that was her grandmother's child, and she had to be in the child's life because she loved her child as well. I want you to uncover those stories and find the potency and the miracle of that story. And how that story is just so important to tell. And that is the story that people are going to connect with. When I do television news, yes, stats are important. Data is important. The official line from the mayor is important. But it's that woman sitting on the porch who tells you how that policy is going to impact her, or how she's worried, or how she's excited, or whatever the case may be, that's the memorable one. That's
Right.
the sweet one that people will remember.
Yes.
I love to get to that story.
So people want to work with you to help you tell their stories. How should they connect with you?
They can connect with me, Monica, at pierreprinciple.com, PIERREPRINCIPLE. We can have a conversation. We can talk. And that's the simplest way. And I'll make sure you have it for your show notes for the email address. And again, I'll be honest and transparent. Let's get to know each other too. It's not just transactional.
It's always about getting to know people. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. How can you tell a story if it's just a transaction?
Right. It's not like, oh, come to the incubator. I want to work with you and tell your story. And even if we at the moment decide not now, I would have connected with somebody in Edmonton, or I know you have an international show, a global show. I would have connected with someone in a little small area, another part of the world. So even if it's not now, I am making note that I want to make sure that I know this person, know their story. And you may end up, I'm going, I spoke to that person like 3 years ago. Look what she's doing. Look what he's doing. It is amazing. So I love it. I love it.
That's wonderful. I really appreciate the generosity and strength of spirit that you brought to this interview. And I'm wondering, is there anything else you'd like to say before we sign off?
Oh, if you're feeling that you don't matter, or that the time has passed, or that you don't know what to do next, I'd like to encourage you to breathe and know that there's some things ahead. Even if it looks like it's almost the end for you, there is someone who needs what you have right now. So please don't give up. Don't give in. Sit with where you are, yes, but know that if you have another moment, another breath, something else is possible for you. And I don't know, Marie, how they came out, but that's what I felt in my spirit to say.
That's a lovely way to end. Thank you so much, Monica. I really appreciated your time. And I know that our podcast listeners will very much enjoy your episode. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Monica Pierre rose from humble beginnings in a sharecropper family to becoming an award-winning journalist and instructor of journalism. Her family's strength and wisdom served as a constant example of who she knew she was called to be. Her experience with family storytelling, anchored by example, engendered her own drive to give other people voice and encourage them to tell their stories. It was an absolute delight to interview Monica. Her winning combination of charm, humor, and inspiration were impossible to resist. Monica made me think that although most families believe a doctor, dentist, lawyer, or car mechanic would be great professions to call on for help, a good storyteller provides a legacy that carries the next generations forward. If you loved this interview as I did, do share it with a friend and subscribe, rate, and review the Culture and Leadership podcast while you're at it. There is a very simple way to do that. Just go to shiftworkplace.com/podcast and it will all be there in front of you to click on. Thank you so much for listening, and may culture and leadership connections continue to guide and inspire your day. Want to show some appreciation? You can buy me a coffee. What? How do you buy a coffee for a podcast owner? Well, there's a way. Let me explain. You go to buymeacoffee.com/Marie Gervais. That's spelled MarieGervais. So it's buymeacoffee.com/Marie Gervais. And when you go to that website, what's going to happen is you'll get a chance to click on 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 cups of coffee at $5 a piece to help contribute to the cost of the podcast. And yes, it's $5 for a cup of coffee because it's quality coffee for a quality podcast. So I hope you will contribute and you'll help us to reduce the costs of the podcast by going to buymeacoffee.com/Marie Gervais. Thank you in advance for your generous contribution.